To all things housed in her silence, nature offers a
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tanveer Syed, the Bengal Dragon, Blind Man Reviews. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons, as all your support really helps this legally blind YouTube content creator remain motivated to continue making a variety of different type of videos in this channel, and would go a long way in helping this channel grow through the YouTube algorithms. I just recently finished playing God of War Ragnarok on the original PlayStation 4. I have linked the playlist in the description below in case you want to have a first hand look on how a legally blind person managed to complete the game with all accessibility features relevant to a visually impaired person. So, this is going to be essentially the last video of this playlist. So, welcome everyone to the review. Let us begin with accessibility.
the bear that keeps to his own line.
I thought it'd be more efficient for me to just have the headphones as I am using text to speech to read off the points that I've made. Okay, the positives about the accessibility. First is its presence. It at least allowed me to complete the game from beginning to end. And basically, the main campaign, it was, although difficult, it was playable. Number two, the audio cues. Yes, these were actually very important in terms of navigation and in terms of actions required that needs to be taken. Yes, it takes some getting used to because God of War Ragnarok, I think it does push the PS4 to its limits, its absolute limits, like in terms of its sheer size and the amount of content and the amount of things that you can do. And to have corresponding audio cues for all of that, or for most of that, yes, it takes some getting used to, but once you're getting used to it, and once you have gotten accustomed to it, yes, it is a fun experience, especially in places like combat, where the evade queue, the block queue, the shield strike queue, and everything else, it actually is a very essential part of combat. And you have seen that through my gameplay that towards the beginning, I did not get accustomed to the audio cues. But once I did get accustomed to the audio cues, I was able to finish off the bosses a lot easier. Number three, the helpful suggestions that you see pop up at the right side of the screen from time to time, which is actually spoken out to you. This is in the form of helping you solve some puzzles, in terms of telling you what you can do, what you can destroy, what you can burn, telling you that some enchantment slots and accessibility slots are empty, and giving you helpful tips like that from time to time. I found that to be very helpful. Now, the negatives. Number one, no skip puzzle button. If you're going to incorporate so much from The Last of Us Part 2, why don't you have a skip puzzle button? There are so many parts in the game that require you to do a specific puzzle carried out in a specific way for you to make mandatory progress of the game. And I'm not even talking about the runic chests. The runic chests, oh good lord, I think I opened maybe one or maybe two of them in my entire gameplay. But yes, it is just flabbergasting. Why would you do that? Why would you have so many puzzles in a game and not have the skip puzzle button? Number two, inconsistent navigation guide markers. If you have the navigation markers on, then you'll see, at least on the original PS4, from time to time, the navigation marker will take you to a seemingly dead end or will just point randomly in a direction. And this will confuse the player, especially if the player is someone like me who is visually impaired or legally blind. So, this was so off putting. If you have to get a full scope of what this looks like, go to my playlist and seek the video where I indicate that it took almost an hour, over 50 minutes to open one gate because I did not do something else elsewhere, which the navigation marker did not point me towards. Number three, lack of navigation markers when it is needed. A lot of times, especially during puzzles, if you hit the navigation marker button, it will basically give you the sound that there is nothing to navigate to. And the machine doesn't know how to guide you. And this is so frustrating because you don't know what to do. You are basically stuck. The navigation marker is indicating that you have to do something there, but you have no idea what to do. And one of the most frustrating parts of this, well, early on was in Spartalfheim, but later on, this is the part that I failed to capture because I don't know, my PS4 was acting up and it didn't capture that part. It just captured like 45 seconds. So I deleted that part and I was not going to go through that part again. The Phantom battle, once Kratos reunites with Atreus and you're looking for Surtur. Yes, the Phantom battle where you have to drain the life out of the Phantom, then aim at one pillar and destroy it, and then search for another pillar. When you're searching for the second pillar, the navigation marker doesn't work. And Atreus just says that, this rock wall seems fragile or something along those lines. I had to look up someone else play it online and then figure out that there is a small hole in a wall where I have to throw and detonate a drop near spear to expose the second pillar. So the navigation marker unavailable at that time was actually a very big hindrance. And things like this from time to time actually hinders the flow of a game for people who are disabled in certain way or who are visually impaired or whatnot. Number four, the text to speech being unavailable during the inventory menu. Why on earth would you remove that? If you're taking so much from The Last of Us Part 2, why would you not have that during your inventory management and hinder the flow of the game for a person with visual impairment? This is why, like, all of that lore material that has been accruing in my playthrough, I never read through even a single one of them because I'm not going to strain my eyes. I'm not going to give myself basically a form of motion sickness just like reading through a big block of text and have that recorded at the same time. My playthroughs are awkward enough as it is because a person with normal vision, usually, if they're not accustomed to people with low vision and how they play games, they will not understand what's going on. Number five, no accessibility assistance whatsoever when it comes to solving puzzles in the game which are not related to the main quest, but still adds a lot more lore and a lot more story material and a lot more context to the overall game. This needs a lot more work, Sony Santa Monica. Please improve this in your future updates and please be wary of this the next time you make anything God of War related or anything that you guys publish as a gaming studio. My overall rating of accessibility in this game, 6 out of 10. I'm sorry, 6 out of 10 because this level of accessibility, it takes a lot of patience, especially if you're visually impaired, and it actually does make the game playable, but there are still a lot of parts that just frustrates the player even with accessibility features, and it almost feels like an accessibility feature was added as an afterthought, that it didn't need that much quality control, which is, unfortunately, it is very heartbreaking because the reality is that everything requires money, and for some reason accessibility, in many areas there is very little money to speak of whatsoever.
The world that hardens is a harsher winter holds.
Now let's talk about the gameplay. The positives. There's nothing much to say here actually, because most of what was positive about God of War 2018 was retained here, and some few additions were added here and there, such as the drop near spear and whatnot, which were all good touches. And also, I think they might have used a different engine, but overall, the gameplay, it really felt very dynamic, action packed, intuitive, and overall very engaging, even for a person with visual impairment like myself. The negatives. Number one, the boat. Oh my god, I hate the boat. Every time I'm on a boat, I end up crashing into something again and again and again and again, and I keep tripping up again and again. The sled is not this frustrating, but the boat. Oh my god. God of War Ragnarok did not improve upon the boat from God of War 2018. So, yes, that is a negative. Number two, maybe I'm playing this on the original PS4 and that is why my system is being pushed, but the companion can seem a little unresponsive from time to time. I don't know, I kept pressing the square button and I did not perceive any action being taken. Also, from time to time, the companion or Mimir will give you advice on where the attack is coming from, and Freya takes forever to say, enemies on your left, enemies on your right. I'm like, can you please speed that up a little bit? You can just say, look out to your right, look out to your left, or to your right, to your left. Something like that. Instead of saying enemies to your, and then what direction? I'll have to wait for Freya to clarify that. As a visually impaired player, it is a bit off putting. Number three, too many puzzles. Sony Santa Monica, what is the point of this many puzzles? Good lord, this is why I hate the Vanaheim part of the game. On top of all of the puzzles you brought back those dead spaces where there's like a black mist or something covering the floor, and if you touch them twice, you die until you freeze a switch somewhere. You brought those back right at Vanaheim, and I was enjoying its absence that far in the game. And once I remembered that part, that death trap, I'm like, oh my god, now I remembered that was one of the things I hated in God of War 2018. So my overall rating of the gameplay, I will still give it a 9 out of 10. Yes, there are some frustrating parts, but the parts that are not frustrating are actually very entertaining.
The parent forced to eat its young before it grows.
Let's move on to the voice acting. The positives. Christopher Judge, who won an award for best performance, deservedly so, as Kratos. Sonny Soljic, Daniel Bisuri. Oh my god, Daniel Bisuri. Folks, let me just explain this, okay? Because my world revolves around sound. The performance that Daniel Bisuri put here, okay, this performance, this other person who I call one of the greats now, the great Laura Bailey. Laura Bailey herself will struggle to do what Daniel Bisuri did in God of War in both games. Laura Bailey, perhaps the highest ranking voice actress that there is right now, she will struggle. Everyone else, they don't even come into question. She played her role very well. Alistair Duncan played his role very well. Ryan Hurst, the voice of Thor. I'm like, oh my god, that feels like Thor from beginning to end with every vocal tone change. That really does feel like Thor. And the voice of Sindri. And believe me, if the story element was not there for Sindri, people would not have caught this. I believe it was his last name is Hamilton, like it's Adam Hamilton, I think. So his voice acting was also very good. Brok's voice acting was also very good. Now, if there are some negatives, I will say that the southern accent on the dwarf, it did not fit her because somehow in that Norse mythology, a hard southern accent somehow does not work. But for me, the biggest letdown in terms of voice acting was Odin. Odin is the equivalent of Zeus from Olympus. Okay. Odin is to the Norse world what Zeus is to the Greek world. And Corey Burton in God of War 2 and God of War 3 absolutely nailed his role as Zeus.
It did not have to be this way, my son. This path is of your choosing. Even now, as you draw your last breath, you continue to defy me! Everything you have ever known, Kratos, will now suffer because of your sacrilege. You will never be the ruler of Olympus.
In this game, Odin sounds like a professor. He sounds like a random old man, not a heavenly father figure, not the all father.
Why isn't he dead? Are you talking? Who told you to do that? You don't talk. You don't think. I think. You kill. It's a simple fucking concept. What is this? Are you broken? I am your father. Take the hammer and kill who I tell you to kill.
If you have to have someone called the all father, please don't have him sound like an insurance salesman. But voice acting overall, 9.5 out of 10.
like blood upon the snow.
And finally, let us get to the story. First, let me get the small part out of the way, the negatives. I will only point out one major negative that I came across, and that's to do with the pacing. The transition points between Kratos and Atreus' gameplay, it felt a bit forced from time to time. And yes, it did mess up the pacing a little bit. And those awkward moments of comedic relief and this and that, all soft moments and whatnot, it felt just a little bit out of place. And this led to some moments such as Atreus and the Beanstalk, Atreus in Jungle Book, and a talking squirrel. Okay, so these are more like Netflix sideshow material type of padding. The positives, however, oh my god, people, ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves. This is going to be a long segment. Where do I begin with the positives? I know, let's begin at the very beginning. At the very beginning, Freya comes in and attacks Kratos. Right there. Right there. The winter is harsher. Fimbulwinter is upon everyone. And yes, later on we find out that Freya can attack in Midgard because of Fimbulwinter, and some of Odin's curses and restrictions are lifted. So Freya seeks retribution. Kratos is constantly trying to protect himself and Atreus. The signs of Ragnarok are all around them, all in the beginning 5 minutes of the game. Ladies and gentlemen, oh my god, this is unbelievable an opening. Number two, the progression of the story. Oh my god. Yeah, barring a few distractions like, Atreus in Ironwood and whatnot, and like freeing the giant snake and reminiscent of Jack and the Beanstalk and whatnot. Yeah, those side distractions aside, the other parts of Atreus, they're actually very good because they actually tell a very interesting story about the people around Atreus and who the people are whilst they're interacting with Atreus as well. It really tells you a lot about their psyche. And believe me, once you finish the game, this alone, amongst many other things, this alone warrants another playthrough of the entire game from beginning to end. Believe me, because now that you have all this insight, go back and look at why the people said exactly what they said, did exactly what they did. Even like talking about Kratos's past, okay, even like, when a lot of those things are referenced, even those are done very well. Let me just give you one example. When you go back to Vanaheim and the bird Freya says, just shut up and kill things, Kratos later replies, do not ask me to kill again. I am no one's monster, not anymore, or something like that. I will never be another person's monster. And this is not only a reference to the 2018 God of War, where Kratos says, I know, but I am your monster no longer. But this is a reference to all the God of War games before he came to the Norse mythology.
like blood upon the snow.
Now let us talk about the character arcs. Ladies and gentlemen, Kratos. I don't think any game can beat Kratos' character arc, especially if you know of Kratos' past. And if you've played the previous God of War games and understand that those events are starting to weigh on his conscience, you see time and time again, he does not want a vengeful war. He does not want vengeance. He does not want to get involved in such conflicts. But in the end, he sees that there is no other way. That is why, reluctantly, he actually becomes the general. And even in his speech, you can hear the reluctance.
I do not want this war. We have suffered enough. Prophecy did not lead us here, nor will it win this battle. Wars are won by those that are willing to sacrifice everything. If that is the cost of vengeance, so be it.
And in his constant avoidance of trying not to do what he knows, because remember, he's a Spartan. Being a Spartan is all he knows. Warfare and whatnot. This is the best thing he knows, and he's trying not to do what he knows best for his son. And what ends up happening? He tries to hold on too tightly. He tries to overcompensate. People, how many fathers and mothers have we seen, or we see, or we know that are doing this exact same thing to their children? That they're trying to overcompensate for something that happened to their past, that's something that they have experienced before. They are trying to move so far away from that that they end up overcompensating. They end up overdoing something. This overcompensation, we see this in Kratos. And the consequence of this overcompensation, we see this as well. Atreus starts to push him away. And only towards the end, when Kratos realized that Kratos is turning Atreus into the Greek Kratos, when Atreus says this,
more or less what you wanted. I didn't want this. No.
Close your heart to it. Close your heart.
Who are they?
Midgardians. Odin took them in. They shouldn't be here. They're not soldiers.
Odin put them in our path to die.
It's war. Wars are won by those who are willing to sacrifice everything.
which resembles when Kratos from God of War 3 said this.
As we speak, the war for Olympus rages on, and mankind suffers.
Let them suffer. The death of Zeus is all that matters.
Then Kratos realized that he was wrong. He should not make his son close his heart because that is not who he is. He should allow his son to open his heart. And yes, that is what Faye wanted in a dream. And now that is what Kratos wants as well. And we see this change from time to time in Kratos, that he is much more accommodating. He's less angrier. He even says thank you from time to time. And he considers someone like Brok as a friend who he was annoyed by in God of War 2018. So we see this change, but the most significant part of this change is during Ragnarok, during this interaction. And this is why when Kratos spared Thor's life and Kratos said,
Don't you know what I've done? Yes! But what will you do now? We don't change. Destroy us! No more. No more. For the sake of our children, we must be better.
man, that is one of the best directed lines in gaming, I believe. I will focus on the directing a bit more at another point, but just that, think about that. Kratos, the destroyer of worlds, is telling Thor, the destroyer of worlds, father to father, destroyer to destroyer, someone who was used by other people to destroy, to someone who was used by Odin to destroy. Kratos needed to say this, okay? Because here's the thing, if Sith said it, I don't think it would have had that much of an effect. If Odin said it or if Atreus said it, it wouldn't have that much of an effect. Kratos said this. And I believe, yes, Thor knows what Kratos has done. But in the end, Kratos reveals that he knows what Thor has done as well. And then he asks, what are you going to do now? This is why Kratos saying this line at this point, for the sake of our children, we must be better. This is the best placement of this line if you had to put it in the game. You couldn't have put it anywhere else better in the game. So we see that Kratos,
You were just an animal. Passing on your cruelty and rage, you will never change.
Kratos has changed. And this is why, like, when Odin visits and says that, do you know what it's like to be worshipped and loved and revered? That actually hit Kratos hard, and he started to cry a little bit. And this is why, at the very end, when Kratos saw his panel that there is a world, there is a possibility where he is revered and worshipped and loved as a god, as a benevolent god, he started to cry. And he said, come, there's much for us to rebuild. So through all of this, Kratos has changed.
The ground walked here is a wonder.
Now let's talk about Freya. Freya started being very angry with a vengeful heart. She really wanted to kill Kratos, but there was no other way for her vengeance because she was stuck in Midgard, so she didn't know what else to do. Then, through the interactions, through Atreus's diplomacy, if you will, Freya slowly learns that maybe Kratos can be of more use to her. Then Freya slowly starts to come around, learning a bit more about Kratos' past, learning about Calliope, learning about, the atrocities in Olympus, learning about he knows what it's like to lose a son, and he knows more. He knows what it's like to lose a child that he inadvertently ended up killing with his own hands. He knows what a rift between siblings actually is, especially when one brother hates the other person. He knows of that hate with Demos. He knows of all this, and through learning all of this, and also finding out that there is a way to take the battle to Odin and regaining her powers, and also seeing that other people, especially Kratos, he has forgone the ways of the god of war, the vengeful god that he was. Freya also has changed because although Freya wanted to make Odin suffer, you saw at the end Freya didn't know what to do with Odin's soul. So Freya has changed.
It's easy promises never to hunger.
Now let's talk about Atreus. Atreus starts the game still not knowing what he is and what his capabilities are. Yes, he has the information that he is a half god, half giant, and half mortal, like man, bear, pig, or something. Yeah, but he doesn't know what that entails. So he goes off to explore on his own. He goes off to find out who he is himself. He even visits Freya on his own. Okay, yeah, he took some help from Sindri. He found Groa's prophecy or something. He even spearheaded the search for Tyr and brought Tyr to Sindri's house, which, by the way, if you haven't played the game, okay, I don't know what you're doing so far in the review, but spoiler alert, it turns out to be Odin. It turns out to be Odin disguising himself as Tyr. And man, that alone, perhaps the biggest plot twist in gaming. It was executed so well. And that alone, on top of everything else, it warrants another playthrough of the whole game up until that point and see and look for the signs, the subtle hints and signs of where the fake Tyr is revealing that he is actually Odin. For your information, after Asgard falls, I believe it's in Alfheim or something, you do find the actual Tyr because you have to free him from the fallen part of Asgard that contains the prison. Atreus also finds that there is a prophecy where Kratos dies in Atreus' arms, and Atreus, with not trying to tell his father, because Atreus knows that his father will just be overprotective again. But Atreus has to protect his father as well. If a father has to protect a son, the son also feels that the son has to protect the father. This dynamic was executed so well. And Atreus, in this confusion, he didn't know what to do. He made mistakes. He made many mistakes. He even let out DMX in his mistakes. He tried to work with Odin as well. And that's where he gets to know a bit more of Heimdall and Thor. But in the end, we see that Atreus is still not that ready. Yes, he knows how to fight, but the overall grander scheme of life, he still needs guidance from people who are more knowledgeable than him, such as Kratos and Mimir. So Atreus ended up finding a balance on when to be Atreus and when to be Loki. And this is another beautiful line Kratos said, that Loki can go, Atreus will remain. So even through this journey, we saw that Atreus has changed.
And all things nature's given.
Next, let's talk about Thor, God of Thunder. He started the game as Odin's lapdog, that he wasn't even allowed to seek vengeance for the death of his own children. He was said to just stay quiet and just be diplomatic about it. But still, his wife tried and tried, like, don't be your father's lapdog. Don't be your father's lapdog. Look at what it did to Magni and Modi. Look at what it might do to Thrud, your remaining child. And Thor kept resisting, kept resisting. He even told Atreus that the only reason you're not mush is because the All-Father says so, or something along those lines. And this is why in the final battle with Kratos, Thor says that now I'm actually allowed to kill you, which means that in their first battle, he was not allowed to kill Kratos. So he didn't know of anything else except for being Odin's lapdog destroyer. This is why in the bar, Thor says that the God of Thunder is only good for two things: pissing meat and killing giants. And this is why he was basically drowning his sorrows in alcohol. That's what he was doing. But at the very end, when he was starting to come around and be convinced by his wife that not to be Odin's lapdog. What does Thor do? Thor does the first thing that comes to his mind: vengeance for the death of his children. That's why he wrongfully turns his anger towards Atreus, that you killed my son and now you're sleeping in his bed. You turned my father against me. And this is why that last battle where Thor says that we are destroyers, we can never change. And Kratos convinces him that yes, they can change, because if a god of war like Kratos can change and spare Thor's life, who was also a destroyer of his world, even Thor can change. And Thor has changed.
She takes all things back from me.
And finally, let us get to the Holdra brothers. Oh my god, the Holdra brothers. Okay, Brok, yes, we see he has changed, that he becomes a lot more cooperative, he becomes a lot more tolerant, even after finding the truth that he's actually a revenant and a part of his soul is actually missing. And this is the part where you go to get the Dropnir spear. And even Brok thanks Kratos and calls him a friend for helping him throughout all this. Even forgives Sindri at the end of his life. Which brings me to Sindri. Ladies and gentlemen, I have seen grown men cry. Grown men cry at Sindri's dialogue in Tyr's temple after Brok died. Okay, I've seen some of the reactions. For God of War to get that reaction out of so many people, this just goes to show how beautifully executed Sindri's character arc was. Brok, like, the change not that much, but for Sindri, he went from being the comic relief germaphobe to someone who doesn't care anymore. This is why you see he is without gloves. There's blood all over his body. He is angrier. He is more assertive. This is why, like, when people were talking about, okay, what to do with the soul? What to do with this? What to do with Odin's soul? Odin's soul. What do you do with it? What do you do with it? Sindri just came, grabbed it, and smashed it. And then he says, that's what happens next. My God, the most profound change was in Sindri. And do you know why it stands out? Do you know why? Because Sindri is the only person whose change was negative. It went from a positive mindset to a negative mindset. Okay? He went from being happy and joyful and even funny in a comic relief type of way to being angry and bitter and just serious. Okay? As if like he has nothing else left to lose. So this change stood out the most because it was unexpected, and in the entire game, it was the only negative change of main characters relevant to the plot. And this is one very important psychological phenomenon that I don't know how many people in gaming understand this. This is empathy. Because one reason why people started to cry when they saw Sindri's reaction is because they realized Sindri was justified completely in feeling that way. Yes, Sindri, at the back of his mind, he knew that Kratos and Atreus were not the real culprits. Everyone were fooled. But Sindri is so consumed by the trauma of losing his brother in front of his own eyes, and basically this time losing him forever, because Mimir revealed that now there's nothing to bring back. So if you go back to the Lake of Souls in Alfheim, there's nothing to bring back. So this time Brok is gone for good. To see this, people realize that Sindri is justified in being this angry. And coupled with the fact that Sindri's wound is fresh. Kratos' wound is not that fresh. He probably got used to being covered in the ashes of his first dead family. Freya's wound is not that fresh. Sindri's wound happened just there. Literally, it happened the previous day, canonically speaking. So Sindri's completely justified. And this is how empathetic storytelling works.
I've walked the earth and there are so few here.
Finally, let us get to Odin. Odin is a person who, by the end of the game, you realize that he just manipulates again and again and again to get what he wants. He will throw everything for his objective. Even the death of his son, he even won't spare Thor. If Thor gets in his way, he will kill Thor. And that's what happened. He ended up killing Thor when Thor refused to obey his orders. Odin is the only one who did not change. And maybe this has something to do with fear, because let's say in God of War 2, it is revealed that Zeus is actually working out of fear. In God of War 3, it is elaborated a bit more that the opening of Pandora's box allowed fear to infect Zeus and basically influence his decision making. Odin also, he has expressed that he has fear of the unknown. What happens to a god after he dies, or what's in that realm tear? He has a lot of fear of the unknown. And this is even indicated in God of War, the 2018 version. If you listen to Mimir's stories of the lengths Odin will go to for knowledge of the unknown, knowledge of what he doesn't know. And this is why Odin, I believe Atreus wanted to see the good in Odin, but Atreus saw that there is no good in Odin. And this is why Atreus says something like, I wish you hadn't said that. Odin is the only one who doesn't change.
How dark the night and just how cold the wind.
Which brings me back to the directing. Ladies and gentlemen, I have not seen a game executed this well in terms of directing and placement of dialogues. This is why you see it in my gameplay, right? A lot of times I just stop when Mimir or Freya or anyone else has something to say, because even the dialogue is there to tell a story in many different ways if you read between the lines and the words and the letters. It is there to tell a lot more than what is just being said. Okay, one example of this, and yes, I've seen grown men cry at this as well, is this one part where when you go to find Dropnir's spear, Brok asks Mimir a question.
Got another riddle for you. What gets bigger the more you take away from?
Well, let's see. Something abstract, I expect. Appetite? No, that doesn't work.
Stump the stump.
Oh, isn't that clever?
And Mimir tries and tries and tries to find the answer. Says, it's love, it's hunger, or something along those lines. Only at the very end, when you get the true ending, Mimir finds the answer.
A hole. What? Gets bigger the more you take away.
This hole is a hole of the soul in a person's heart, is an emptiness, a void, a deficit that just got bigger for Sindri. The placement of this line, the music, the camera angles, the directing, the facial expression. My God, people, if you have not seen the true ending of God of War Ragnarok, Brok's funeral, I implore you, go see it. And if you have the context in mind of why Sindri is feeling that way, believe me, it is just that much more epic. And speaking of epic, listen, so many parts in the game are there to get you hyped are there to get your adrenaline flowing. Okay, remember that part where Thor and Heimdall faced off, and Heimdall says that, "How are you going to attack me?" And Thor says, "Look into my eyes and ask me that question again," or something along those lines. I'm like, man, we're gonna see Thor kill Heimdall. Things like that is just, it's directed so beautifully. And just another example, take a look at this scene.
Ready yourselves.
Can you capture the epicness that, yes, they're going for a huge battle, and yes, it felt like it, that they are going for a very huge battle, but the focus from the character stories, the character progressions were not taken away. They were still maintained. And this is what I mean, good directing and brilliant execution. Believe me, the story execution is so good that it almost feels that it's worth playing through the silly parts, because the parts that are not silly are just unbelievably good. So, the basic gist of the story of this entire game is about people being able to change despite their past. Not regardless of their past, but keeping their past in mind, learning from their past, and changing, or being influenced by the past. And change can either be positive or either be negative, like you saw with Sindri, and positive, like you saw with Kratos and whatnot. And there are those who are so obsessed that their obsession will not let them change. That is Odin.
I've no more hunger now to see.
I don't know how Sony Santa Monica did it. I thought God of War 2018 could not be topped, could not be outdone. My God, God of War Ragnarok outdid God of War 2018. The greatest story in gaming ever, people, ever told. Nothing from Capcom, nothing from Naughty Dog, nothing from Bethesda. Yes, I'm a fan of Fallout as well. Nothing from Bethesda. Hell, even nothing from Konami. I'm a huge fan of Metal Gear Solid. Nothing comes close to God of War Ragnarok, especially if you keep all of the games in context. Nothing comes close to God of War Ragnarok that I have played. My overall rating for this game, 10 out of 10. Yes, it has flaws. Listen, for me, my 10 out of 10 is not perfect, but my 10 out of 10 is something that is unbelievably good and legendary. Does it have flaws? Yes, it has flaws. Some pacing, accessibility, a lot more improvements are required. Okay. And the pacing with some of the stupid elements, maybe that could have been brushed out a little better, a bit of the gameplay, but the storytelling was so epic that it almost overshadows all of the flaws, the minor flaws in the game. My overall rating, ladies and gentlemen, this is hands down 10 out of 10. There is no debating this. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. I would love to learn what your thoughts are on this game. Please do leave it in the comment section below. And I apologize if the video is a bit too long, but a game as epic as God of War Ragnarok demands that people reviewing it, even someone as legally blind as myself, pull out all the stops to review a game that is this epic. People, I bought this for $59.99. People, this is a $90 game. On the PS4, this is a $90 game. I honestly feel I ripped off Sony Santa Monica by paying only $59.99 for this. This game is that good. Let me know what you thought about this game in the comment section below. And as always, hit that like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons, as all your support really helps this legally blind YouTube content creator to continue making a variety of different type of videos in this channel consistently. The embargo is being lifted soon enough in March, and the Evil Within music video and analysis video and other videos are coming in March. So please stay tuned. This is your boy Tanveer Side, the Bengal Dragon, Blind Man Reviews signing out, and I look forward to reading your feedback.